Although they are now arguably one of the most influential rock acts in history, Nine Inch Nails wasn't always well known and famous. In 1988, while he was still working as a janitor in a recording studio, Trent Reznor took it upon himself to create one of the most explosive and well-regarded independent debut albums of all time. That album was 1989's Pretty Hate Machine. Let's talk about it. I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. There is no arguing that Nine Inch Nails is one of my favorite acts of all time. I don't even know if I can call them an act or a group, because technically it's spearheaded by Trent Reznor. Although there is a live band, and in recent years, Reznor has also recently garnered the accompaniment of other members of the group, including his wife and frequent collaborator Atticus Ross. So, for the rest of this review, I'm going to call them an act or a group. I'm going to alternate between the two. If I do that on accident, I'm sorry. However, since their beginnings start here with Pretty Hate Machine, I am going to refer to them as Trent Reznor himself, because technically, only with very minimal help, Trent Reznor made this album almost entirely by himself on a Macintosh computer using the program Performer. Now, you probably heard me say in my intro, this is one of the most explosive, I said that, explosive, independent debut albums of all time. Now, I say that because it is also one of the highest selling independent debut albums of all time, going platinum within its first couple of years. That's incredible for an independent artist, and an independent label especially. Having an album hit platinum ranking is incredible, and for good reason, especially with Pretty Hate Machine. In my opinion, and I'm just going to get this out of the way right now, I think Pretty Hate Machine is the pinnacle of Nine Inch Nails' work. A lot of fans are going to say Downward Spiral is their best, maybe The Fragile, maybe even their 2007 album Year Zero is their best. However, I am going to go with the somewhat general consensus in some areas and say that Pretty Hate Machine is their peak. It was their best work to date. Nothing so far in their expansive discography has topped it. Now, I say this because as an album, Pretty Hate Machine is very conceptual and well-rounded. I've always had a soft spot for concept albums. I believe I even mentioned this in my Lateralis review. I've always loved them because it allows me to have a personal sense of attraction and embodiment with the music and its story. Some of my favorites include Pink Floyd's The Wall, Liz Phair's Exile in Guyville, and Radiohead's OK Computer. However, Pretty Hate Machine is definitely among my top 5 of them, mostly because I consider it personally to be a concept album. Although you could argue that, yes, it could not be a concept album technically, I personally believe that it is, and here's why. The album itself follows a very linear structure, with like a lot of albums. A lot of songs throwing around a very similar message and tone. This album was made pretty much on the heels of a breakup that Reznor had endured just about a year or so before, being written with his heartbreak in mind. This is especially poignant when you come to tracks like Something I Can Never Have, which is quite possibly one of the most depressing tracks that Nine Inch Nails has ever put out. And that's saying a lot, because this is a group that made an entire concept album about suicide and committing it at the very end of the album. It's insane. But this song kind of embodies everything that Reznor was feeling at the time, with his depression, with his heartbreak, with thinking that he'll never fall in love again. And to be totally honest with you, these themes kind of come back in the later discography of Nine Inch Nails with the more personal concept album, The Fragile, but I'll talk more about those concepts and that album in a different video. I will eventually get around to that, as that is an album that I am very excited to look at. Now, Pretty Hate Machine, as a whole, does not follow the exact linear concept. The album opens up with lead single Head Like a Hole, which does not relate to the whole heartbreak situation of the album. Instead, it actually provides a personal sense of backlash from Reznor towards, to be honest, I can't really decipher this. I always thought it was about authoritarianism and, just authority in general. but it's very hard to discern because he's very vague, especially early on. Pretty Hate Machine does feature some of Reznor's most important writing in his lyrics, and it features some of his best written songs. However, there are also some very indiscernible and admittedly cheesy lyrics as well. Some of the songs on the later half of the album, including That's What I Get and The Only Time, are some of his most, oversaturated and hilariously laughable songs, as enjoyable as they are. They're unbelievably hilarious for a bad reason, because these are songs that definitely carry a very personal story to them. These are a part of the overarching concept of heartbreak, and although they're not as central to the album's concept as songs like Sin, Something I Can Never Have, Sanctified, Ring Finger, these songs do fall in place like every other song, but they don't fall in place as well as some of the other ones, if you know what I'm saying. So, to summarize, what do I truly think about Pretty Hate Machine? Well, to keep it incredibly simple, I think it is probably one of the biggest landmarks in indie music history, and industrial rock especially. Without Pretty Hate Machine, we would not have some of the biggest albums of the 1990s, like Downward Spiral, Filter's Short Bus, and other albums that I will have to put here on screen because those are the two examples I can think of off the top of my head. Now, overall, I think in the long run of Nin's discography, Pretty Hate Machine is aged the worst. And this is due to the fact that it's very 80s enveloped, alright? It's very 80s centric. Unlike the Downward Spiral, Broken, The Fragile, these albums from the 90s that kind of sound ahead of their time and or timeless, Pretty Hate Machine is very much rooted in 80s synth pop and rock, to the point of where it kind of sounds like something they'd play at a high school reunion, depending on the mood. Now, that's not to say that it's bad, because this is coming from somebody who literally thinks Pretty Hate Machine is the best Nine Inch Nails album to date. And with that, I'd like to give Pretty Hate Machine a 10 out of 10 score for being the most interesting, to say the least, enjoyable, and most conceptual and brilliant record from Trent Reznor and his crew, in my opinion. Although I do know that the Downward Spiral has one of the best concepts in any album that I've ever heard, I think Pretty Hate Machine does a better job of exerting itself. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. It's greatly appreciated. Please do not forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought. If you've heard this album, what is your opinion on it? If you haven't heard this album, I recommend you give it a listen. Keep your eyes peeled for the next review. I'll see you guys later. Take care.